The Lincoln Elementary cafeteria smelled like industrial cleaner and yesterday's meatloaf. Sofia Martinez sat at the corner table by herself, her Dora the Explorer lunchbox untouched in front of her. 6 years old with dark curls that her mama always braided so carefully each morning, and brown eyes that had learned to look at the floor more than they looked at faces. She pushed her sandwich around the plastic container, not hungry. Her stomach hurt. It always hurt on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Those were the days when Mrs. Brennan had playground duty, which meant those were the days Sofia might do something wrong. Speak too loudly, forget to raise her hand, drop her pencil. Mrs. Brennan said Sofia was a problem child. Disruptive. Attention-seeking. That's why she needed special correction. The closet was small and dark. It smelled like old paper and something sour Sofia couldn't name. Sometimes Mrs. Brennan locked her in there for 10 minutes, sometimes longer. Once, Sofia had been in there so long she'd wet herself, and then Mrs. Brennan had made her sit in it for the rest of the day as punishment for being disgusting. Sofia learned not to cry. Crying made it worse. Sofia. Her best friend Emma bounced over, pigtails swinging. Want a trade? I have fruit snacks. No, thank you. Sofia's voice came out small, like it always did now. Emma's smile faltered. Are you okay? You seem sad? I'm fine. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. But she wasn't fine. And when the afternoon came and Mrs. Brennan called her name with that special tone, the one that meant Sofia had done something wrong again, though she didn't know what, her whole body went cold. Sofia, come here, please. The classroom went quiet. The other kids knew. They always knew. They'd learned not to look, not to say anything. Tommy had tried to tell his parents once, but Mrs. Brennan had called him a liar, and his parents had believed her because teachers didn't lie. Adults didn't hurt children. That's what everyone said. Sofia stood on shaking legs and walked to the front of the room. Mrs. Brennan was 43, with bottle blonde hair pulled into a tight bun and thin lips that rarely smiled. She'd been teaching at Lincoln Elementary for 18 years. Before that, she'd taught at 2 other schools in different districts. Always moving, always finding new students who were too young to articulate what was happening, too scared to tell, too conditioned to believe adults were always right. You were talking during silent reading, Mrs. Brennan said, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. What did I say about disrupting class? I'm sorry, Mrs. Brennan. I was just asking Emma if I could borrow her eraser. Excuses. The woman's hand closed around Sofia's thin wrist, gripped tight enough to bruise. Come with me. The supply closet was at the key back of the classroom, behind the reading corner. Mrs. Brennan unlocked it with the key she wore on a lanyard around her neck, opened the door to darkness, and pushed Sofia inside. Maybe an hour in here will teach you to follow rules. The door closed. The lock clicked. Darkness swallowed everything. Sofia sank to the floor, pulling her knees to her chest. She counted in her head, the way Mama had taught her for when she felt scared. 1, 2, 3, 4. But the numbers didn't help. Nothing helped. She was trapped. And no one was coming. And this was her life now. She didn't know that today would be different. She didn't know that today, finally, someone would hear her. Across town, in the South Side neighborhood where chain restaurants gave way to family-owned businesses, Adriana Martinez wiped down tables at Russo's trattoria with efficient, practiced movements. 28 years old, exhausted in ways that went deeper than physical tiredness, she'd worked at the Italian restaurant for 3 years. The pay was decent, the tips better than most places, and the owner, an older man named Giovanni, who treated his staff like family, had been understanding when Sofia got sick or when school called for an emergency. What Giovanni didn't know, what Adriana hid behind carefully applied concealer and long sleeves, was that her daughter was falling apart, and she didn't know how to stop it. Sofia had always been such a bright, happy child, curious and talkative, full of questions about everything. But since starting first grade at Lincoln Elementary 4 months ago, she'd changed, grown quiet, developed nervous habits, picking at her cuticles until they bled, refusing to eat, waking up screaming from nightmares she wouldn't describe. Adriana had asked what was wrong, visited the school, spoken to the principal, requested a parent-teacher conference with Mrs. Brennan. Every adult had reassured her that Sofia was fine, adjusting. First grade was a big transition. Some children just needed time, but a mother knew. Something was wrong. Terribly, fundamentally wrong. She just didn't have proof. And without proof, without her daughter willing to speak about what was happening, Adriana felt helpless. She couldn't afford to pull Sofia out and homeschool her. She needed this job. Couldn't afford private school tuition. Could barely afford the one-bedroom apartment they shared in a building where the heat worked sporadically, and the neighbors fought at 2 a.m. Sofia's father had left before she was born. Adriana's family had disowned her for getting pregnant out of wedlock. She was alone in this, navigating parenthood and poverty, and a system that seemed designed to ignore people like her. Adriana, table 6 needs water refills. Marco, the head waiter, passed by with a tray of pasta. On it, she grabbed a pitcher and moved through the dining room, smiling at customers, making conversation, playing the role of cheerful server while her mind screamed with worry about her daughter. The lunch rush was dying down when Giovanni emerged from the kitchen, his weathered face creased with concern. "Adriana, phone call for you. Says it's from Sofia's school." Her blood turned to ice. She grabbed the phone from Giovanni's office, pressing it to her ear with a hand that shook. "Hello? Ms. Martinez, this is Nurse Patterson from Lincoln Elementary. Sofia had a small accident in class. She's fine, just a bit upset. We think you should come pick her up early today." "What kind of accident? Is she hurt?" "She's not injured, just emotionally distressed. We'll explain when you arrive." The line went dead. Adriana stared at the phone, her heart hammering. Giovanni appeared in the doorway, reading her expression correctly. "Go. Family first. We'll manage without you this afternoon." She grabbed her purse and coat, barely remembering to thank him, and ran for the bus stop. The ride to Lincoln Elementary took 20 agonizing minutes. She texted the school, asking them to let Sofia know she was coming, that everything would be okay. When she finally burst through the school's front doors, the receptionist directed her to the nurse's office. Sofia sat on the examination table, her legs dangling, her face blotchy from crying. When she saw Adriana, she launched herself into her mother's arms with a sob that sounded like it had been building for months. "Mama, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Shh, baby, it's okay. You didn't do anything wrong." Adriana held her daughter, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo, feeling the small body shake against hers. "What happened?" Nurse Patterson, a kind-faced woman in her 50s, exchanged a glance with Principal Harrison, who'd joined them. "Mrs. Brennan called us to her classroom after lunch. Sofia had been in the supply closet for approximately 90 minutes. "The supply closet?" Adriana's voice went sharp. "Why?" "Mrs. Brennan said Sofia had been disruptive and needed time to calm down. It's a consequence she occasionally uses." "You lock children in closets as punishment?" The words came out louder than intended. Principal Harrison raised his hands in a placating gesture. "It's not locked, Ms. Martinez. It's just a quiet space for students who need to self-regulate. Mrs. Brennan is very experienced in classroom management techniques. Mama, she locks it." Sofia's voice was barely audible against Adriana's shoulder. "She has a key. I can't get out." "That's not—" Harrison started, but Adriana cut him off. "Are you calling my daughter a liar?" "Of course not. But children sometimes misunderstand situations. Mrs. Brennan has been with this school for years. She's an excellent teacher with a spotless record. Adriana looked at her daughter, this small, scared child who'd stopped smiling months ago, and felt something break inside her chest. Not despair. Rage. Cold, clarifying rage. Sofia won't be returning to Mrs. Brennan's class. Ever. Ms. Martinez, I understand you're upset, but we need to follow proper procedures. If you have concerns about teaching methods, we can schedule a meeting with the school board. My daughter was locked in a closet for over an hour. That's not a teaching method. That's abuse. Harrison's expression hardened. That's a very serious accusation, one that could have legal implications if made publicly without evidence. I'd advise you to be careful about making such claims. The threat was clear. Adriana felt her advantage slip away. She had no proof, no witnesses willing to speak. Just her daughter's word against a teacher with 18 years of experience and a principal who'd rather protect the school's reputation than one first grader's well-being. Come on, Sofia, we're going home. She signed the early dismissal paperwork, her hand shaking with suppressed fury, and led her daughter out of the building. They took the bus home in silence, Sofia curled against her side, neither of them speaking about what came next, because Adriana didn't know what came next. She couldn't quit her job to homeschool, couldn't afford to move districts, couldn't prove what was happening without Sofia willing to speak up in front of adults who'd already decided she was lying. They were trapped. And Mrs. Brennan knew it. That evening, after Sofia had finally fallen asleep clutching her stuffed rabbit, Adriana sat at their tiny kitchen table with a glass of wine she couldn't afford and couldn't resist. She pulled up the school district's website, searching for transfer policies, alternative schools, anything that might offer escape. The options were bleak. All the good public schools had waiting lists. Private schools cost more than her monthly rent. Charter schools required applications submitted months in advance. Her phone buzzed. A text from Giovanni. "Everything okay? You seemed upset when you left. If you need anything, let me know." Giovanni. Sweet, grandfatherly Giovanni, who ran his restaurant like a family business and treated his staff better than most employers. But what could he do? What could anyone do against a system designed to protect itself? Still, she texted back. "Thank you. We'll be fine." Another lie. They were not fine. They were drowning. And Adriana had no idea how to save them. What she didn't know was that Giovanni would mention her distress to someone else, someone who had a very different approach to problems, someone who didn't believe in following procedures or waiting for systems to work, someone who believed in immediate, decisive action. And in 3 days, when Sofia whispered her secret to the right person, everything would change. Dante Valentino didn't look like most people's idea of a mafia boss. At 36, he was tall and lean rather than stocky, with dark hair kept short and simple, olive skin, and gray eyes that could shift from warm to glacial in seconds. He wore expensive suits, but nothing flashy. Charcoal grays and navy. Blues, perfectly tailored but understated. The kind of man who could walk through a room and be noticed without demanding attention. He'd inherited his father's organization at 22, younger than anyone expected. After the old man's heart gave out during a particularly heated argument about territorial disputes. 14 years later, Dante had transformed what had been a fractured, violent operation into something more subtle, more efficient. He still dealt in the gray areas, gambling, protection services, importing goods that didn't always clear customs properly. But he'd pulled back from drugs, from prostitution, from anything that preyed on the desperate. It wasn't morality exactly, more like pragmatism. Those businesses attracted attention from law enforcement and rival families. They created chaos. Dante preferred order. His legitimate businesses included 3 restaurants, 2 construction companies, and a security firm that provided bodyguards for wealthy clients and surveillance systems for businesses. Everything legal on paper, everything profitable, everything carefully structured to withstand scrutiny. Russo's trattoria was one of his. Giovanni ran it, had run it for 30 years, back when Dante's father had owned it. The old man was loyal, competent, and asked no questions about the private dining room on the second floor, where Dante occasionally held meetings that had nothing to do with pasta. Friday afternoon, Dante stopped by for a meeting with his accountant. Legitimate tax discussions that could have been conducted in an office downtown, but felt more comfortable over Giovanni's homemade gnocchi. He was leaving through the kitchen when Giovanni caught his arm. "Mr. Valentino, do you have a moment?" "Of course." Dante followed him to the small office behind the walk-in freezer, noting the worry lines on the old man's face. "What's wrong?" "One of my waitresses, Adriana Martinez. Good woman, hard worker, single mother. She got a call from her daughter's school 2 days ago and left in a panic. When she came in yesterday, she looked..." Giovanni struggled for words. "Haunted. I asked if everything was okay. She said yes, but I know what fear looks like." Dante leaned against the desk, listening. "You think someone's threatening her?" "I don't know, but she has a little girl, 6 years old, and something's very wrong." Most people wouldn't have cared. An employee's personal problems weren't the boss's concern, especially not in the service industry where turnover was constant and emotional distance was survival. But Dante wasn't most people, and he had his reasons. "Keep an eye on her. If she needs time off, give it to her. Paid. And let me know if the situation escalates." "Thank you, Mr. Valentino." Dante left the restaurant, but the conversation lingered. A single mother. A small child. Something very wrong. The words echoed in his mind as he drove across town to his next meeting, stirring memories he'd buried deep. He'd had a sister once. Lucia. She'd been 7 when she died, small for her age, with their mother's dark curls and a laugh that could light up rooms. Their father had been building his empire then, making enemies, playing dangerous games with dangerous people. One of those enemies had decided the best way to hurt Dante's father was through his children. They'd taken Lucia from school one afternoon. By the time they found her 3 days later, it was too late. The details of what happened in those 3 days were things Dante still couldn't think about without rage that threatened to consume him. He'd been 14, old enough to understand, young enough to feel helpless. His father had burned the world to find the men responsible. It had taken months, but eventually, justice came. The kind of justice that happened in warehouses and left bodies that were never found. It didn't bring Lucia back. Dante had promised himself 2 things after his sister's death. He would never be helpless again, and he would never ignore warning signs that a child was in danger. Adults made choices that led them into trouble. But children? Children were innocent. They deserved protection, whether their parents could provide it or not. So when Giovanni mentioned a frightened single mother and a 6-year-old daughter, Dante paid attention, made a mental note, waited to see if intervention would become necessary. He didn't know that necessity would walk up to him 3 days later at Russo's, while he was having lunch alone in a corner booth, reading reports on his tablet. He didn't know that a small girl with dark curls and brown eyes full of fear would slide into the seat across from him and whisper 6 words that would change everything. "My teacher locks me in closets Monday afternoon." Russo's trattoria was quiet between lunch and dinner service. Dante sat in his usual corner booth, reviewing quarterly reports from his construction companies. Numbers that looked clean on paper, projects that were legitimately profitable, everything structured to withstand audits. He sensed her before he saw her, that instinctive awareness that came from years of watching his back. A small presence approaching his table with hesitant steps. Dante looked up. The little girl couldn't have been more than 6 or 7. dark curls pulled into slightly messy braids, wearing a purple sweater with a unicorn on it, and jeans with grass stains on the knees. She carried a backpack covered in cartoon characters, and her brown eyes were huge in her small face. She stopped 3 feet from his table, clearly terrified but determined. "Can I help you?" Dante kept his voice gentle, the same tone he'd used with Lucia when she'd had nightmares. The girl glanced over her shoulder toward the kitchen, where he could hear someone, probably her mother, talking to Marco about table settings. Then she moved closer, sliding into the booth across from him with the desperate courage of someone who'd run out of options. "Are you the boss?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I am. My name is Dante. What's yours?" "Sofia." She picked at her cuticles, a nervous habit that had left her fingers raw. "My mama works here. She doesn't know I'm talking to you." "Okay." He set down his tablet, giving her his full attention. Something in her posture, hunched, protective, like she was trying to make herself smaller, sent warning signals through his mind. "Is something wrong, Sofia?" She nodded, swallowed hard, seemed to gather courage from somewhere deep inside. When she finally spoke, the words came out in a rushed whisper. "My teacher locks me in closets." The world stopped. Dante had survived ambushes, betrayals, assassination attempts. He'd learned to keep his expression neutral, regardless of what emotions churned beneath. But sitting across from this small girl who'd just confessed to abuse with the same matter-of-fact tone another child might use to report a scraped knee, something cracked in his carefully maintained control. "Tell me everything." His voice came out rougher than intended. He softened it. "Start from the beginning. What's your teacher's name?" "Mrs. Brennan, at Lincoln Elementary." Sophia's eyes filled with tears. She was clearly fighting. "She says I'm disruptive, that I need special correction, so she puts me in the supply closet and locks the door. Sometimes, for a long time, once I—" Her voice broke. "Once I had an accident because I couldn't hold it, and she made me sit in it the rest of the day." Rage. Pure, cold rage flooded through Dante's veins, the kind that made his vision sharpen and his hands flex involuntarily. He forced himself to breathe, to stay calm, to not terrify this child who'd been brave enough to ask for help. "How long has this been happening?" "Since school started. September. But it got worse after I tried to tell Mama. Mrs. Brennan said if I told anyone, she'd make sure Mama lost her job and we'd have nowhere to live." Sofia wiped her nose with her sleeve. "The principal says Mrs. Brennan is a good teacher, that I'm lying. But I'm not lying, Mr. Dante. I promise I'm not lying." "I believe you." He said it firmly, watching relief flood her small face. "Does your mother know you're talking to me?" Sofia shook her head. "She's trying to fix it the right way. Talking to the school people. But they don't listen. And I'm scared. I'm so scared of going back there tomorrow." Dante checked his watch. 3:15. School had let out 45 minutes ago. "How did you get here?" "Mama picks me up from the after-school program at 4, but I told them I felt sick, and they let me call her. She said she'd come get me early. She's in the kitchen talking to Giovanni." Sofia's hands twisted together. "I saw you when we came in. Giovanni said you're the real boss. That you fix problems. Can you fix this? Please?" The desperation in her voice gutted him. This child had exhausted every option. Told her mother. Told the school. Been dismissed and threatened. And now she was begging a stranger in a restaurant to save her because no adult in her life had the power to help. "Sofia!" Adriana's voice carried from the dining room entrance. "Baby, where did you—" She stopped when she saw her daughter sitting with Dante. Color drained from her face. She hurried over, professional apology already forming on her lips. "Mr. Valentino, I'm so sorry." "Sofia, you know better than to bother customers." "She's not bothering me." Dante gestured to the empty booth seat beside him. Please, sit. We need to talk. Adriana hesitated, clearly torn between obeying her employer and protecting her daughter. Finally, she slid into the booth beside Sofia, pulling the little girl close. Is something wrong? Sofia told me about her teacher, about the closet. Adriana's expression cycled through shock, embarrassment, and fear in rapid succession. I'm handling it. I've spoken to the school. I'm working through the proper channels. The proper channels don't work. Dante's voice was quiet but absolute. The school is protecting itself. Your daughter is being abused by someone in a position of power, and the system is designed to believe the adult over the child. He leaned forward. But I don't care about systems or channels. I care about making sure Sofia is safe. Let me help you. I can't afford to hire a lawyer. I've looked into it. I'm not talking about lawyers. He met her eyes directly. I'm talking about making this stop. Today. Permanently. Adriana stared at him, understanding dawning. Mr. Valentino, I appreciate the offer, but I can't ask you to. You're not asking. Sofia did. He looked at the little girl who was watching him with hope that was painful to witness. And I'm saying yes. What are you going to do? What needs to be done? He pulled out his phone. First, Sofia isn't going back to that school. Not tomorrow. Not ever. I know people on the board of St. Catherine's Academy. They have an excellent first-grade program, and they'll have space for Sofia starting immediately. Full scholarship. I can't accept charity. It's not charity. It's restitution for what happened on my watch. His jaw tightened. Sofia came to my restaurant for help. That makes her safety my responsibility. And I take care of my responsibilities. What about Mrs. Brennan? Sofia's voice was small but hopeful. Will she get in trouble? She'll never hurt another child. Dante's tone left no room for doubt. I promise you that. He made 3 phone calls while sitting at that table. The first was to his head of security, Vincent. I need comprehensive background information on a teacher named Brennan at Lincoln Elementary. Everything. Work history, personal life, finances, any complaints filed against her. I want it within 2 hours. The second was to his lawyer, Michael Chen, who specialized in education law. I need documentation prepared for a formal abuse complaint against a teacher. I'll send you details, and I want to know every legal avenue for shutting down any retaliation against the family making the complaint. The third was to Sister Mary Catherine at St. Catherine's Academy, a woman who owed Dante several favors after he'd donated generously to rebuild their library 2 years ago. I have a first grader who needs immediate placement. She's bright, well-behaved, and in an emergency situation. Can you help? By the time he hung up, arrangements were made. Sofia would start at St. Catherine's tomorrow morning. Adriana would have written documentation of everything that had happened, prepared by a lawyer who knew how to navigate school bureaucracy. And Vincent was already pulling information that would reveal every skeleton in Mrs. Brennan's closet. I don't understand. Adriana looked overwhelmed. Why are you doing this? You don't know us. Dante was quiet for a long moment, memories of Lucia flooding back. Let's just say I understand what it's like when the system fails to protect someone who can't protect themselves, and I have the resources to circumvent that system. He stood, straightening his suit jacket. Giovanni will give you the rest of the week off. Paid. Get Sofia settled at her new school. I'll handle the old one. Handle it how? He met her eyes, and she saw something there that made her stop asking questions. You don't need to know the details. You just need to trust that Mrs. Brennan won't be a problem anymore. After they left, Sofia clutching her mother's hand, looking back at Dante with something like worship in her eyes, Giovanni appeared at his table. You're going after a schoolteacher. I'm going after someone who tortured a child. The family will ask questions. They'll want to know why you're involving yourself in something that doesn't affect business. Then I'll tell them the truth. Dante's voice was cold. That woman locked a 6-year-old in a closet for 90 minutes, made her urinate on herself and sit in it as punishment, threatened her mother's livelihood to keep her quiet. If anyone in the family has a problem with me addressing that, they can come say it to my face. Giovanni nodded slowly. Your father would have done the same. For what it's worth. My father would have killed her immediately and called it justice. Dante picked up his tablet. I'm going to be more strategic. Ruin her career, her reputation, her ability to ever work with children again, and make sure every parent whose child was in her classroom knows exactly what kind of monster they trusted. And if that's not enough, then I'll revisit more permanent solutions. Vincent called back 90 minutes later with information that made Dante's blood boil. Mrs. Brennan, Linda Brennan, age 43, had taught at 4 different elementary schools over the past 18 years. At each one, she'd stayed between 3 and 5 years before relocating for personal reasons. Dig deeper into those relocations, and a pattern emerged. Complaints from parents, whispers from students. Nothing ever officially investigated, nothing ever proven, but enough smoke to suggest substantial fire. She'd learned to be careful, to choose victims whose parents lacked resources or credibility, to hide behind her spotless classroom and glowing performance reviews from administrators who cared more about test scores than teaching methods. She's got a system, Vincent reported. Targets kids from single-parent homes, kids with behavioral issues already noted in their files, kids whose parents won't be believed if they make accusations. Sofia Martinez checked all her boxes. Single mother, working class, no family support system. What about the current school? Any other complaints? 2. Both from last year. Both dismissed by Principal Harrison as misunderstandings. One family transferred their kid to another school. The other... Vincent paused. The mother lost custody 6 months later. Unrelated on paper, but the principal provided a character statement for the custody hearing that painted her as unstable and prone to making false accusations against authority figures. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. Brennan had perfected the art of choosing targets who could be silenced and built alliances with administrators who'd rather protect a teacher than admit they'd failed to protect students. Anything we can use? Dante asked. Plenty. She's been filing insurance claims for classroom supplies she never purchased. Small amounts, but consistent over years. That's fraud. She also failed to report a DUI from 8 years ago on her employment applications. That's grounds for termination, and I found 3 parents from her previous schools willing to go on record about their children's experiences. With fresh allegations from the Martinez family and corroborating historical testimony, we can build a case that'll end her career. Do it. Get statements from everyone. Coordinate with Michael Chen. I want documentation so comprehensive that the school board has no choice but to investigate. What about Principal Harrison? He's complicit in covering this up. Him too. But teachers first. Dante's jaw tightened. I want Mrs. Brennan out of that classroom before another child sits in her supply closet. He drove to Lincoln Elementary himself, arriving at 4:30 as the after-school program was winding down. The building was red brick and institutional, the kind of place that looked cheerful in promotional materials, but felt hollow in person. The front office was staffed by a receptionist who looked up from her computer with practiced smile. Can I help you? I'm here to see Principal Harrison. My name is Dante Valentino. Do you have an appointment? No, but he'll want to see me. Dante's tone made it clear this wasn't a request. The receptionist's smile wavered. She picked up her phone, murmured something, then nodded. His office is down the class hall. Second door on the left. Principal Harrison was in his late 50s, with thinning gray hair and the self-satisfied bearing of someone who'd never seriously questioned his own authority. He stood when Dante entered, extending a hand. "Mr. Valentino, I wasn't expecting visitors today. How can I help you?" Dante didn't shake his hand. "I'm here about Mrs. Brennan and her treatment of Sofia Martinez." Harrison's expression closed off immediately. "I'm afraid I can't discuss specific students or personnel matters with non-family members. Confidentiality regulations. Sofia Martinez is under my protection now, which means her safety is my business." Dante moved further into the office, his presence filling the space. "And I've done my research. 4 schools in 18 years, complaints at every single one. A pattern of targeting vulnerable children from families who can't fight back. You knew, or you should have known. Mr. Valentino, I don't know what Sofia told you, but children often misinterpret disciplinary measures. She told me she was locked in a supply closet for 90 minutes, that she urinated on herself because she couldn't hold it, that Mrs. Brennan made her sit in it for the rest of the day as punishment." Dante's voice dropped to something dangerous. "Are you going to stand there and tell me that's a misinterpretation?" Harrison's face reddened. "Every teacher has their own classroom management techniques. Mrs. Brennan uses a quiet space for students who need to self-regulate. With a lock that only she controls. I've investigated the supply closet personally. There's no lock." Dante pulled out his phone, opened the photos Vincent had sent, security footage from the hallway, showing Mrs. Brennan using a key to open the supply closet door, then closing it, then locking it, then walking away, while a small figure pounded on the door from inside. That's Sofia Martinez, 6 years old, locked in that closet from 1:15 to 2:45 on Thursday afternoon. 70 minutes. He set the phone on Harrison's desk. "Still think it's a misinterpretation?" The principal stared at the footage, color draining from his face. "How did you get this?" "That's not your concern. Your concern is that you have a teacher abusing students and you've been covering for her, either out of incompetence or complicity. I don't care which. But it ends. Today. You can't just come in here and make demands." "I'm not making demands. I'm making a statement of fact." Dante leaned forward, his hands flat on the desk. "Mrs. Brennan will be removed from her classroom immediately. You will launch a formal investigation into every complaint ever filed against her. You will contact the families of every student she's taught in the past 5 years and inform them of the situation. And you will cooperate fully with the school board's inquiry into how this was allowed to continue. And if I refuse, then this footage, along with comprehensive documentation of Mrs. Brennan's history and your failure to act on multiple complaints, goes to every news station in the city. By tomorrow morning, you'll be the principal who protected a child abuser. Your career will be over, your reputation destroyed. And I'll personally ensure that every parent in this district knows your name and what you allowed to happen." Harrison's hands trembled slightly as he reached for his phone. "This is blackmail. This is accountability. Something you should have implemented months ago." Dante straightened. "Sofia Martinez is transferring to St. Catherine's Academy. You'll provide all necessary records by end of business today. And you'll make sure there's no retaliation against her mother, who works at Russo's Trattoria. If Adriana Martinez experiences any problems, job loss, custody issues, anything that could be traced back to this complaint, I'll know, and I'll come back." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm making you a promise. Protect the children in your care or face the consequences. Your choice." He left the office without waiting for a response, knowing Harrison would comply. Men like that crumbled when faced with real consequences. They were used to systems that protected them, to bureaucracies that valued reputation over truth. Take away that protection, and they had nothing. By 6 o'clock, Vincent confirmed that Mrs. Brennan had been called to an emergency meeting with Principal Harrison and placed on administrative leave pending investigation. By 7, News reached Dante that 3 other parents had come forward with their own stories, emboldened by Sofia's complaint and the principal's sudden willingness to listen. By 8, local news stations were running stories about allegations of abuse at Lincoln Elementary, complete with statements from parents and demands for transparency from the school board. By 9, Mrs. Brennan's teaching license was under review by the state education department, and her name was circulating on parent advocacy websites as someone to avoid. Dante watched it unfold from his office above Russo's, a glass of whiskey in his hand, feeling nothing like satisfaction. Justice wasn't vengeance, it was ensuring the monster couldn't hurt anyone else. And while Mrs. Brennan would likely never face criminal charges, the system was too broken for that. She'd never work with children again. That would have to be enough. His phone rang. Adriana Martinez. Mr. Valentino? Her voice was thick with tears. I don't know how to thank you. The school just called. Mrs. Brennan is suspended. They're investigating. And St. Catherine's confirmed Sofia's enrollment for tomorrow. How is she? Sleeping. Actually sleeping, not just pretending while she waits for nightmares. Adriana's breath hitched. She hasn't slept through the night in months. But tonight she went to bed without fighting, and she's been asleep for 2 hours. Something in Dante's chest loosened. Good. That's good. I need to pay you back. For the lawyer, for the school, for everything. I'll work extra shifts, There's nothing to pay back. Consider it handled. I don't understand why you're doing this. Dante looked out his office window at the city lights, remembering another little girl with dark curls who'd never had someone powerful enough to save her. Because Sofia asked for help, and I was in a position to give it. That's all the reason I need. After they hung up, he poured another whiskey and stood at the window for a long time, thinking about systems and power and the responsibility that came with having both. Tomorrow, Sofia would walk into a new school where teachers were vetted carefully and children were protected seriously. Tomorrow, Adriana would go to work without the crushing fear that her daughter was suffering. Tomorrow, Mrs. Brennan would wake up to the ruins of her career and the knowledge that she'd finally been held accountable. And Dante would return to running his empire, knowing he'd used his power for something that mattered more than money or territory or influence. He'd saved a child. In Lucia's name, in memory of what he couldn't do for his sister, he'd saved Sofia Martinez. That was worth everything. 3 weeks had passed since Sofia's first day at St. Catherine's Academy, and the change in her was remarkable. She smiled now, genuine smiles that reached her eyes and lit up her entire face. She talked about her new teacher, Miss Rodriguez, who was young and kind and never raised her voice. She'd made friends with a girl named Isabella who shared her love of unicorns and art projects. The nightmares hadn't disappeared completely, but they came less frequently. Once or twice a week instead of every night. And when Sofia woke up scared, Adriana could comfort her with promises that were actually true. You're safe now. Mrs. Brennan can't hurt you anymore. You never have to go back there. Mrs. Brennan had been fired, not quietly, not with a severance package and confidential settlement. She'd been terminated for cause after a formal investigation uncovered years of misconduct, with her teaching license revoked by the state board. The story had made local news, carefully worded to avoid lawsuits, but clear enough that everyone understood what had happened. Principal Harrison had resigned to pursue other opportunities. Translation: he'd been forced out before the school board could fire him publicly. A new principal, Dr. Chen, had been brought in specifically to rebuild trust with parents and implement oversight protocols that should have existed all along. 5 other families had come forward with their own stories about Mrs. Brennan, children who'd been humiliated, isolated, punished in ways that scarred deeper than physical injuries. The collective testimony had been damning, undeniable, impossible to ignore. And through it all, Dante Valentino had remained in the background, a shadow that, orchestrated everything while staying out of the spotlight. Adriana knew he was responsible. Sofia knew. But to the rest of the world, it looked like the system had finally worked. Like justice had prevailed through proper channels. Only Adriana understood the truth. Proper channels had failed. What saved Sofia was a man who operated outside those channels, who'd used power and resources and fear to force the system to work when it was designed to protect the abuser instead of the victim. She didn't know how to process that. Didn't know how to reconcile gratitude with the uncomfortable knowledge that Dante's methods existed outside anything she'd been taught to trust. Saturday morning, she brought Sofia to Russo's for breakfast, a weekly tradition that had developed naturally after that first desperate conversation. Sofia loved the restaurant's atmosphere, the way Giovanni always had a special treat for her, the sense of safety that permeated every corner. And if Adriana was honest with herself, she came hoping to see Dante, to thank him again, to reassure herself that the man who'd saved her daughter was real and not some desperate fantasy she'd conjured in her darkest moment. He was there, sitting in his usual corner booth with his tablet and coffee. When Sofia spotted him, she broke away from Adriana's hand and ran across the dining room. "Mr. Dante." He looked up, and his entire expression softened in a way Adriana had never seen directed at anyone else. "Sofia, how's school?" "Really good. We're learning about butterflies, and Miss Rodriguez said we're going to raise caterpillars until they turn into butterflies, and then release them." She climbed into the booth across from him without invitation, her backpack sliding to the floor. "Can I show you my art project?" "Of course." Sofia pulled out a crumpled piece of construction paper covered in glitter and crayon. It was a drawing of a garden with flowers and butterflies and, in the center, 3 figures holding hands. A woman, a man, and a small girl between them. "That's Mama, and that's you, and that's me." Sofia pointed to each figure. "Miss Rodriguez said to draw our family, and I know you're not really my family, but you saved me. So that kind of makes you family, right?" Dante stared at the drawing, something raw and vulnerable crossing his face. "Yes, that makes us family." Adriana approached the table, her heart in her throat. "Sofia, you can't just invite yourself to Mr. Valentino's table." "It's fine." Dante's voice was gentle. "She's always welcome." He looked at Adriana, and their eyes met across the booth. "Both of you are." She slid into the seat beside Sofia, acutely aware of how close they were, how intimate this felt. The 3 of them sitting together like they belonged. Like this was normal, instead of extraordinary. "I keep trying to figure out how to thank you," Adriana said quietly. "Words don't feel like enough." "You don't need to thank me." "Yes, I do. You changed our lives. You gave Sofia her childhood back." Her voice cracked slightly. "You gave me hope that the world isn't completely broken." "The world is broken," Dante said, "but sometimes you find people willing to fix small pieces of it. That's all I did." "You did more than that. You believed her when no one else would. You acted when everyone else made excuses." Adriana reached across the table, her hand stopping just short of his. "You saved her." Their eyes locked, and something passed between them. Recognition, maybe, or the beginning of something neither of them had expected. Sofia looked between them with the knowing expression of a child who understood more than adults gave her credit for. "Are you going to date my mama?" Sofia asked with 6-year-old directness. Adriana's face flamed. "Sofia. What? You said Mr. Dante is nice and handsome, and he makes you smile the way you used to smile before everything got bad." Dante's lips quirked into something that might have been amusement. "Your daughter has excellent observational skills." "I'm so sorry." "Don't be." He finally closed the distance, his hand covering hers on the table. His touch was warm, solid, real. "She's not wrong. You do make me smile. Both of you do." The admission hung in the air between them. Adriana should have pulled her hand back, should have maintained professional distance, should have remembered that Dante Valentino was her employer and a man whose power came from operating outside the law. But his hand on hers felt like safety. And when she looked at her daughter, her happy, healing daughter who'd been brave enough to ask a stranger for help and wise enough to know that sometimes the right person wore an unexpected face, she couldn't bring herself to pull away. "I don't know how this works," she said quietly. "I don't know what this even is." "Neither do I." His thumb traced small circles on her hand. "But I'd like to figure it out, if you're willing." Before she could answer, Giovanni appeared at their table with a knowing smile. "Breakfast is on the house today. All of you. And Adriana, take the weekend off. Paid. You've earned it." After he disappeared back into the kitchen, Sofia giggled. "Everyone knows you like each other. You're the only ones who act surprised." Dante laughed. A real laugh. Unguarded and genuine. "Smart kid. I get it from Mama." Sofia returned her attention to her art project. "So, are we going to be a real family? Because I think that would be good. Mama needs someone to take care of her sometimes. She takes care of everyone else, but nobody takes care of her." Adriana's throat tightened. "Baby, it's more complicated than that." "Why?" It was such a simple question. Why couldn't they be a family? Why couldn't she accept the growing feelings between them? Why couldn't she let herself believe that this man who'd moved heaven and earth to protect her daughter might actually care about them beyond obligation? "Because I'm scared," she admitted, the truth spilling out before she could stop it. "I'm scared that this is too good to be true, that something will go wrong, that I'll mess this up like I've messed up everything else." Dante's hand tightened on hers. "You haven't messed up anything. You're a good mother who was trapped in an impossible situation, and you did what you needed to do to protect your daughter." His gray eyes held hers. "I understand scared. I live with it every day. But I also understand that some things are worth being scared for." "Like us? Like you?" Sofia watched this exchange with satisfaction, then announced, "I'm going to talk to Giovanni about the butterflies. He said he used to have a garden in Italy." She grabbed her backpack and skipped away, leaving her mother and Dante alone. "She's not subtle," Adriana said with a shaky laugh. "Thank God for that." Dante shifted closer, his other hand coming up to brush a strand of hair from her face. "I'm not good at this. At feeling things. At letting people close. My life is complicated and dangerous, and I have no right to ask you to be part of it. But I can't stop thinking about you. About Sofia. About what it would be like to come home to both of you instead of an empty apartment." His voice roughened. "I told myself I'd help you and then step back. Let you rebuild your lives without my shadow over them. But then Sofia drew that picture, and I realized I don't want to step back. I want to be the person standing between you and anything that threatens your happiness." Tears pricked Adriana's eyes. "You already are that person." "Then let me keep being that person, not out of obligation or guilt, but because I choose to, because you both matter to me more than anything else in my world." She knew she should be cautious, should think about the implications of getting involved with someone whose business existed in moral gray areas, should consider what it meant for Sofia to grow up around that influence. But she also knew that Dante had done more to protect her daughter in 3 weeks than any system, any authority figure, any proper channel had done in months. That his power, however he'd acquired it, had been wielded for good when it mattered most. "I have conditions," she said finally. "Name them." "Sofia comes first, always. If your business ever threatens her safety or well-being, we walk away. No arguments." "Agreed. I keep working. I need my own income, my own independence. I won't be supported like some kept woman." "You'll work because you want to, not because you need to, but I respect the independence." His eyes crinkled with amusement. Though I reserve the right to spoil Sofia occasionally. Occasionally, not constantly. Adriana took a breath. And we take this slow. Sofia's been through enough upheaval. She needs stability, not her mother jumping into a relationship without thinking it through. Slow. I can do slow. Dante's smile turned soft. I've waited 36 years to feel like this. I can wait a little longer to do it right. He leaned forward, and she met him halfway, their lips meeting in a kiss that was gentle and promise-filled and terrifying in its perfection. When they broke apart, both breathless, Sofia's voice carried from the kitchen. Giovanni, they're kissing. I told you it would work. Adriana buried her face in her hands, laughing and mortified in equal measure. Dante just smiled, that rare, genuine expression that transformed his entire face. Your daughter is a menace. She's your daughter now too, apparently. Good. He pulled out his phone, snapping a photo of Sofia's crumpled drawing before she could protest. I'm keeping this. First piece of art for my collection. Over the following weeks, they built something that resembled normal. Dante came to dinner twice a week at the small apartment Adriana could finally afford to upgrade, thanks to the raise Giovanni had given her, though she suspected Dante's influence there too. He helped Sofia with homework, his patience endless even when fractions made her frustrated. He taught her chess and let her win occasionally, but not always, understanding that real confidence came from earned victories. On weekends, they explored the city as a family. Museums and parks and the zoo, where Sofia developed an obsession with penguins that resulted in Dante buying her an encyclopedic book about Antarctic wildlife. He integrated into their lives so seamlessly that within a month, it felt like he'd always been there. Sofia's nightmares stopped completely. She thrived at St. Catherine's, her natural brightness no longer dimmed by fear. And when she talked about her family, she included Dante without hesitation or doubt. Adriana watched it unfold with equal parts joy and terror. Joy because her daughter was healing. Terror because she was falling in love with a man whose world operated by different rules, and she didn't know what that meant for their future. One night, after Sofia was asleep, Dante and Adriana sat on the couch with wine and quiet conversation. She'd been building courage all evening and finally asked the question that had been haunting her. What you do? Your business? Is it dangerous? He didn't insult her with lies or deflection. Sometimes, I've made it less dangerous than it was. But there's always risk in what I do. Could Sofia get hurt? Could I? I've spent 15 years building protections precisely so that people I care about don't get hurt. His jaw tightened. I lost my sister when I was 14. Lucia. She was 7. Someone wanted to hurt my father, so they took her. By the time we found her, he stopped, unable to finish. Adriana's hand found his, threading their fingers together. I'm so sorry. I swore after that I'd never be helpless again, that I'd never ignore warning signs that a child was in danger. He met her eyes. That's why I helped Sofia, not just because it was right, but because I couldn't stand by and let another little girl suffer when I had the power to stop it. Understanding crashed over her. She reminded you of Lucia. Dark curls, brown eyes, 7 years old, close enough to 6. His voice was rough, and that look in her eyes, that desperate hope that someone, anyone, would finally believe her and make it stop. You gave her what you couldn't give Lucia. I tried. He pulled Adriana closer, his arm around her shoulders. And now I want to give both of you something more. Stability, safety, a life where you don't have to be scared anymore. I want that too. She rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. I want all of it. With you. 6 months later, they stood in front of a judge, not for marriage, but for something equally important. Dante had petitioned to officially adopt Sofia, with Adriana's blessing. The paperwork was complete, the home study passed with flying colors, and now they waited for the final decree. Sofia sat between them in the courtroom, wearing her favorite purple dress and clutching Dante's hand. When the judge asked if she understood what adoption meant, she nodded seriously. "It means Mr. Dante becomes my real dad. Not just pretend family, but actual family that nobody can take away." The judge smiled. "That's exactly right. And is that what you want?" "Yes." Sofia looked up at Dante with absolute trust. "He saved me, and then he stayed. That's what dads do, right? They save you, and then they stay." Dante's eyes were suspiciously bright. "Always. I'll always stay." The judge granted the adoption. Papers were signed, photos were taken, and Sofia Martinez officially became Sofia Valentino. She carried her new birth certificate like it was made of gold, showing it to everyone they passed on the way out of the courthouse. That evening, they celebrated at Russo's. Giovanni had closed the restaurant for a private party. Family only, which included everyone who worked there, and several members of Dante's organization who'd become oddly protective of the small girl who'd walked up to their boss and asked for help. Sofia made rounds, showing her adoption certificate to anyone who'd look. When she reached Vincent, the head of security who'd helped gather evidence against Mrs. Brennan, he crouched down to her level. "You know what this means?" He tapped the certificate. "This means you're officially part of the family, which means we all look out for you now. Nobody hurts our family." "I know." Sofia's smile was radiant. "I'm safe now, forever." Later, after Sofia had fallen asleep in a corner booth, exhausted from excitement, Adriana and Dante stood on the restaurant's back patio under a sky full of stars. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for all of it. For saving her. For loving her. For loving me. Thank you for letting me." He pulled a small box from his pocket, and Adriana's breath caught. "I know we said slow, and I'm not asking for an answer tonight. But I want you to know my intentions. I want to marry you, Adriana. I want Sofia to have siblings if that's something you want. I want to build a life that's as normal as possible given who I am and what I do. I want forever with both of you." She took the box with trembling hands, opening it to reveal a simple but beautiful diamond ring. "You know I'll say yes." "I know, but I wanted to do it right. Court you properly. Show you and Sofia that you're worth the effort and the time and the patience." He smiled. "Though I'm hoping you say yes sooner rather than later, I'm not as patient as I pretend to be." She kissed him, soft and deep, tasting promise and future and everything she'd stopped believing she deserved. "Yes. Now and forever. Yes." Inside the restaurant, through the window, they could see Sofia sleeping peacefully, surrounded by people who'd protect her with their lives. A little girl who'd been brave enough to ask for help, and wise enough to recognize salvation when it came in an unexpected form. She'd whispered her secret to a stranger, and he'd moved heaven and earth to save her. And in saving her, he'd saved himself too, giving him purpose beyond power, a reason to be better than his world demanded. They were a family now, chosen, fought for, and absolutely unbreakable. And that was worth everything. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.